Welcome to today's webinar. And today's webinar is about integration and AI, with a focus on the things you can be doing right now. There's a lot of talk about AI. Some of it's in the future, some of it's right now. But we're going to talk about practical things you can do right now in the world of AI to help enterprise integration. I'm joined today by Dave Phelps, who's a senior cloud solution architect at Microsoft, but very much with an integration focus. So, hi Dave, how are you doing?
Hi Andrew, all good here, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for dialing in. I know you've got you've got a busy day, but thanks so much for joining us. And of course, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrew. I'm CEO of 345 Technology. We're a Microsoft partner specializing in enterprise integration. And all things enterprise integration, any connecting systems, moving data around, we can help you with that. So by all means, have a chat to me, or ping me in the comments, or ping me on LinkedIn, and we can help. Okay, what we're going to do today is fairly straightforward. Well, we've already done the introductions. We're going to look at the problem space very briefly. And then we're going to cover really just a bunch of scenarios that we're looking at. And we're going to focus as much as we can on demos of those. So, if there is anything else that you want to talk about, or comments to make, or questions to ask, please add them in the comments, and we'll get round to them if we can. So first of all, the problem space. Now, as we all know, I mean, ever since really ChatGPT landed, the generative AI has been a massive part of the technology landscape, and it's made massive improvements in the last couple of years. So the things that you can do now, from creating images, creating content, analyzing documents, there are scientific breakthroughs coming off the back of generative AI. I mean, there's just an absolute explosion in the capability that's there. And the thing is, because people are always wanting to announce the roadmap and what's possible, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between what's in the vision, what's in the pipeline, what's in the future, and what's available now. So what we're talking about today really is the capabilities that are available to you at a retail level right now, not on some technology company's research lab, but the stuff that you can actually hook into and use right now. So that's really our focus. So what we're going to do in terms of our scenarios today, I'll just run through them briefly. We're going to look at governing the use of AI using the API management, because when AI becomes at kind of the usable, consumable level, it actually is accessed via APIs, and so using an API governance tool like API management allows us to put some level of control around that. We're also going to talk about how we can create integration assets using AI, and we've got a couple of flavors there for mapping one document format to another, and also what we might be able to do with migrating some assets. We're then going to look at how we can make smarter business processes by embedding AI. Now, I've got a couple of examples there about using AI for routing, but also how we can process documents, and then and also how you can build custom AI agents that can, for example, support your customers better. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Dave, talk us through API management and Azure OpenAI. So, Dave, what's the from a business perspective, what's the key driver here? Because this is something that Microsoft have been talking about quite a lot. But certainly it's not something that my customers are talking to me about a lot. So, what is it that people might be missing as to why this is a really important thing?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that pretty much every customer that I talk to they're investing in AI, whether it's using AI to help their developers or whether it's using AI to help their customers. And with Azure OpenAI, which is our AI service based on the OpenAI models, you can use that service. You can get a token, and you can call that service directly. But what we don't want to do is to have our clients talking to that AI service directly, because that doesn't really give us any control. It doesn't allow us to authorize those clients. It doesn't allow us to rate limit those clients, and it's basically just a free-for-all for anybody to go and call that AI service. So what we want to do is to put something in the way where we can authorize those clients independently of the Azure OpenAI service. We can also then do things like rate limiting, so we can control how many tokens that we want them to use, because Azure OpenAI is based on the consumption of tokens, which is the request that you send and the response that you get back. And that Azure OpenAI service has a capacity. So we want to use that capacity in a way that gives value for money for the customers. So if I just share my screen, and I'll show you how this can get set up in API management. And hopefully you can see my screen. Please, okay.
It hasn't come up yet. But just bear with me one moment, because I can see it. Oops. Excuse my right, let me just. I think I've got to remove my one and then add your one. So there's, we can now see your screen, Dave.
Fantastic. Okay. So this is Azure API Management here. And I've got a bunch of APIs that I've created, but I've got one here I've created called Azure OpenAI. And I've created an operation here called chat, which takes an HTTP post. And what I've done is I've configured my Azure OpenAI service as the back end to API management, to my API. And if we take a look at the policies in here, and so I can edit these directly here using the using the UI, but I'm actually going to go into the code view here and just show you what this looks like. So the first thing I'm doing is changing the URI to go and talk to the model that I've created in Azure OpenAI, which is the completions endpoint, so I can chat with the service. I'm actually doing rate limiting here. So what I'm doing is I am preventing the client from consuming more than 100 tokens per minute. And I'm doing that based on the subscription ID of the caller. So different clients calling this API will have their own rate limit count, but we're preventing more than 100 a minute. And this is really important because it allows you to use those tokens in a really efficient way and to prioritize the clients that are really important to you. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm omitting the number of tokens consumed. So that is really useful because that will tell me how many tokens are being consumed. And I'm actually using the API ID as the dimension here, but there are other dimensions that we can choose there too. And finally, and this is a really important point here, is I'm actually using managed identity to authorize into Azure OpenAI. So the client that's calling APIM, it has no access to Azure OpenAI at all. And all I've done is I've gone into the Azure OpenAI service, I've gone to role-based access control, and I've added my API management managed identity as a user of the OpenAI service. So I think that is probably the one single thing that I would say is really important here, is abstracting the Azure OpenAI service from your clients. And if I just go and test this, then hopefully it will work. And if I send a request, we've got a 200 back, and the capital of France is Paris. No surprise there. And we can see here that we've got these the tokens coming back, and it's these tokens that are going to be emitted to the metrics using the emit token policy. And if I call this again, and we get a response, and again, I don't know how many tokens actually I'm consuming here. There we go. So we finally got a 49. So that's the rate limiting policy coming into effect there. And so I need to try again in 34 seconds when that counter will renew. Should we go back to the slides, Andrew, just for a second before we do the next demo?
So just to recap on what we've done there, I mean, the actually having people connect directly to OpenAI is not a good idea, because what you'll end up doing is people can be spending a lot of money, but you've got no visibility on who's spending it, or no control over who's spending it, and that kind of thing. Whereas just with that simple API management example there, by emitting those usage tokens, we can actually say, okay, yeah, that's this department's used that much, this department's used that much, and so you've got the ability to charge back, but also, you know, you can prevent abuse of the whole. Very, very powerful. Would you like to go to the next slide, Dave? So looking at the integration scenarios.
But before we do that, can we just go back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on number 5 there, which is a really important point. So API management had 2 new features that got released, which is backend load balancing and circuit breaker. And these are available for all backends that you create in APIM. It's not specific to AI, but it actually gives us some really good, a really good feature to use with AI, because what this allows us to do is to have our Azure OpenAI backend, but have another Azure OpenAI backend as well. And we can load balance between them, or we can prefer one over the other. So we might have an OpenAI service that we've deployed in North Europe, for example, that has a particular capacity, and maybe we prefer that over the Azure OpenAI service deployed into West Europe. So what we can do is we can actually point our backends at those 2 different services, and then route the traffic to the preferred region first. And then when that reaches its limits and we start to get failures back, we can use the circuit breaker pattern as well to then route to the secondary region and start consuming tokens from that OpenAI service. And it might be that we've got provisioned throughput, PTUs, deployed in one region, and we've got pay-as-you-go in another. And so our back off, or our failover, is the pay-as-you-go service. So really important feature, and just, you know, it's not specific to AI. You can actually use this today for your own backends if you're load balancing between different regions, for example. Maybe if you've got Azure Functions or Logic Apps or something that's deployed into 2 regions, then you can load balance between them on the back end. So it's a really, really important feature.
Yeah, that's quite useful, because previously, load balancing you might have done something like Traffic Manager or Front Door or something to do the load balancing sort of outside the region, but putting this in API management just gives you a bit more flexibility in that, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, shall we move on to the other integration scenarios?
Okay, so for those that maybe haven't used GitHub Copilot, it's a fantastic tool that really accelerates developers, but it also accelerates integration developers. And the first point here is really about creating mappings. And Copilot is really, really good at creating mappings. And we're focused on using XSLT here, but it also understands lots of other mapping technologies too. And if I just share my screen, I'll show you how you can do mapping with GitHub Copilot and make your life really easy. Just to say that we do have a really good visual mapping tool in Azure Logic Apps, but this is also a really good way of doing mappings. Can you see my screen now?
No.
Do what you did last time.
Yeah, I think I'll do that, and then I'll do that, and there we go. Okay.
So this is a Logic app, and it's running locally here in Visual Studio Code. And it receives an HTTP request, and I'm doing an XML transformation using XSLT. Now, I could go and write the XSLT myself, or as I said, I could use the visual mapper that's available in Logic Apps. But I could just ask Copilot to do this for me. And I've got an order here, and you can see that my request contains field 1, which has got a comma separated list of names. It's got a surname, it's got a title here, MR, and then it's got a product list. And what I'd like to do is to make it look like this. Sorry, like this. So I'd like my name and middle name separated. I'd like my title actually looked up. So I've got my lookup here where MR needs to become Mr. and DR becomes Doctor. I also want the total order quantity to be summed. I also want there to be a total cost. So I want to multiply the quantity by the price, and I want to add these together. And I've also got a couple of a stock check here flag. And I've got some rules here. So if the total order is more than 5,000, I want to create a field under summary called free delivery, and I want to set to true, else false. And if the order quantity is more than 10, I want to set stock check to true, otherwise false. And you can see here that my total cost is actually wrong. My order quantity, that's correct, but in my example here, that's actually incorrect. But what I can do is I can go into GitHub Copilot, and I can say, and I've actually got the context set, create an XSLT3 map. And GitHub Copilot will work its magic, and hopefully it will create an XSLT for me. And I'm doing all of this in real time. It'll be worth the wait. Aha, okay. So what I did here is I gave it the request XML, I gave it my lookup data, and I told it what I want the output to look like. And it's now gone ahead and created an XSLT, still working on it at the moment, still streaming that through. But when that's complete, I will take a copy of it, and you can see it's doing the sum here at the bottom. Hopefully that's completed now, almost. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it into my XSLT. There's one I created earlier, but just to prove that I'm actually using the right one, I've pasted that in. I'm just going to run this locally. This is Logic Apps standard I'm using here, if anyone's wondering. Hence, it's running locally inside Visual Studio Code. And if I go to my tests, here's my payload, and I can click send request, and hopefully that will work. There we go. So we've got a 200 OK back. And we can see here that it's pulled out the middle name, surname. It's done the lookup. So I've got DR here, and it's translated that to doctor. It's copied the products across, and it's also got a total cost of 3,500, which is correct. And it's got the total order quantity, but it's got stock check false and free delivery false. So if I were to increase the order quantity here to 10, send that again, we can now see that we've got the total cost is 15,500. We've got stock check true and free delivery true, because the free delivery is anything over 5,000. And I can change that to MR, send that again, and hopefully that's changed to Mr. So this is a really, really nice, easy way of being able to do mapping. And this would work with JSON as well, because XSLT3 supports JSON. So I'm using XML here, but it doesn't need to be. Shall I move on to the next demo, Andrew, or do you want to talk about it first? Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that we can do is we can make use of copilots in Azure services. So in the case of API management, we have a copilot that we can use directly in API management, and we can use that to help to create policies and describe policies, etc. But the one thing we might want to do is we might be using Apigee or another API management tool, and what we might be doing is migrating to Azure API Management. And here's an example of a policy that is an Apigee rate limiting policy. And if I just go back into GitHub Copilot, I can say, if I just say create an APIM policy for this, because I already have the context of the rate limit. You could just paste the text straight in here, but because I've got the file loaded, GitHub Copilot uses that as the context. And hopefully that will create a rate limit API management. There we go. Excellent. So rate limit by key, because the Apigee was using the API key as its rate limit counter. So here we go. We've actually created the Azure API Management key, rate limit rather. But I could say, you can see here that it's actually used the same key, but I can tell it to use the API Management default key, and that works absolutely fine as well. The other thing that we might want to do, which is maybe a bit more complex, if I stop running this for a second, is I might have something like MuleSoft. MuleSoft has a technology called Data Weave, which is its mapping tool. And so I've kind of got a Data Weave sample here for my order that I created. But I could also say, I can ask it, can you create an XSLT3 from this Mule Data Weave sample? So hopefully that's going to come up with an example. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy the XSLT that it creates. I'm going to paste it into my Logic app, and let's see if it works. And this is great, because if you've got a MuleSoft estate or something where you're actually creating mappings in Data Weave, or if you have a different technology, then you can use this to actually help with your migrations. or you can actually use Azure OpenAI as well to go and point it at your estate, and you could use that to help with this as well. And I know some customers that have actually done that. So here we are. It's created the XSLT, and you also get a description here of what's going on. But I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it directly into my XSLT here, which is this one. Save that. Let's go and run it again. Let's close that. And let's hope this works. So press send. And there is our 200 OK. And look at that. It actually works. And I think that's super cool.
But I mean, what are there any kind of where are the sort of limits for the sort of assets that can be migrated? Because obviously mappings are one thing, but other kind of different bits of code, different languages, different different things will have more or less support in OpenAI. So what are the kind of the sweet spots on this, and what are the ones that are not quite there yet?
I think anything that is fairly well known tends to be really well covered in Copilot, and especially languages and things like data weave, for example. Maybe that's not it's not hugely popular because there aren't that many MuleSoft customers, but Copilot really understands how to do that. And in fact, it's interesting that in the case of Mule, it's really hard to get those skills. They're quite quite hard to get. Whereas Copilot can really take away that pain by converting those difficult mappings using data weave into something that is industry standard and really well understood, and so makes that migration really easy. But I'm not really aware of too many things that aren't covered by Copilot. But as time goes on, it just gets better and better and better. And the other thing you can do, of course, is you can point it at your own data. So I'm just using public Copilot here, but I could point it at my organization data and then use AI over the top of that. And like I said, some customers have actually done that in order to help with their migrations from legacy integration platforms into some, a modern service, modern services like Azure API Management and open API definitions and that kind of thing. So I guess I think I would just give it a go and just try it, and I think people would be very surprised at what it can do.
Yeah, and pleasantly surprised. I think this is the thing there, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially here, I'm able to. I've just got two examples here, but the output actually worked, and I ran it, and it actually came up with the right result. So yeah, it's really good. I love it.
Great stuff. Well,
I think it's over to your demos now.
Yeah. So so just back on the deck. I mean, there's a couple of things that I'm going to talk about here, and that is just making business processes smarter by embedding AI into them. And not everything I've got here has got a demo, but some things. But I do have something to talk through. But one of the things that we've been looking at is that using AI for routing rules for unstructured information. So one of the problems we have with a lot of text documents or messages or emails, as in human written messages, is that they can be hard to process automatically because because they aren't written in a consistent format. But what we can do using the Azure OpenAI tools, we can infer key items of information And in one of the the example we've got is then using this for routing. So so if we look at just going to get my can I get my little colouring in tool? Where's that? So if we look at some routing, and oops, I thought I had the highlighter on then. Right, there we go. So we've got some routing rules that are done on the basis of location, product, and process, and that we want to actually create a a semantic kernel that can actually process this stuff. So if you've got some different we tried it just with some completely off the wall things, but if you're looking at sort of what car does a particular celebrity drive, then it can actually infer that their location might be in the US because they live in Hollywood. You might be looking at an automobile as a product. So if we're looking at location, product, process, you can infer from that they might be looking at automobiles in the US and want credit. Similarly, if you look at what does someone else like for lunch, then they may also, you might go, okay, they might be a US statesman, so we can infer the things US. They might like burgers, and so the process we're looking at might be US burger food additive research in this case. But it's the whole thing of being able to infer the routing out of text that isn't necessarily structured. So we've been integrating with structured data for a long time, but doing routing based on pieces of text is something that we can now do by pulling out. We can ask what is the location, what is the product, and just to talk through that, here's a bit of a reference architecture on that. But if we've got the user end of it, they might be talking through to in this case an Azure function, possibly accessed via API management. And the first thing we might want to do to minimize our API calls is actually to look at, okay, have we got anything in cache from this? So we can use a Redis or a Cosmos DB cache. But if that isn't in the cache, then we can go and we can vectorize a query using the OpenAI. We'll then perform that search, get the result back, and then we can get the answer and return that to the user. So these are, I didn't want to actually delve into too much code on this because a lot of it's code and it's not really nice to present, but you can go through this whole process of pulling out these key bits of information and using that in a traditional integration scenario quite effectively. But what we can also do to build on this, and this is where it is a bit more visual, so we'll delve into this a bit more, is we can use we can use AI models for document processing. So again, we can convert an unstructured piece of data, such as a scanned image or a PDF of something, and we can make that into structured data. And there's a range of pre-built models for this. So I'm just going to go over to my Azure portal, and in here I've got a document intelligence service running in a resource group, and if I go into the document intelligence studio from that, I get loads of different options for what I can do. So do I just want to do OCR? Do I want to look at the layout of the document? Then they've got a whole bunch of pre-built models, invoices, receipts, a lot of US things like US health insurance and identity. But if none of these fit, you can still at the end of it make your own extraction models. So it's very powerful stuff. But we've in this demo we've just been looking at the invoices, and effectively what you can do is they have sample invoices here, but you can run an analysis on an invoice, and then it will actually go through and it will pull out all the different parts of that invoice. So now you can see those have all been colored up. So we can look at the content of that in a bunch of tables, but it will also create that result as a set of JSON data. So when we want to look at any particular field, we can, we can actually go and do that, and it gives us, and it even gives us some code for how we can actually run some code to do this. But if I've saved this model, I can actually create a logic app again with this. So I've got a logic app here to extract invoice data, and again we've just got a trigger here, but it will go and read that document from a blob. We've got some settings in there about what's the where that piece of document is, but it's the analyze invoice thing that is the interesting part, because we've created a connection for that, and we are actually saying that we are doing we've got this our form recognizer, and we can actually go and convert that into a payload by pulling out specific parts of the JSON document and making it an output document. So so what I've got here is some run history of where we've actually just run this over an invoice, and we can actually see some of the data that's involved in that. So if I look at an actual run of this, when we read the blob, then okay, it just comes out as a load of base64 data. But then what we can feed that blob into is the analyze invoice. So our blob data, that base64, then becomes the input for our analyzing invoice, and the output from it is this whole bunch of JSON data with all the values in it that show what we've got. So so it's quite verbose. So even finding something like the date, it's showing you whereabouts on the image it is, what the confidence it is in there, and it will have the value. In this case, it's 11/15/2019. So the result of it is a big chunk of data, but we can, but what we can do is, by having done that, we've been able to pull out the invoice number, the date, and the amount, and just an actual usable packet of data from all that. So having taken in literally a scanned image of that invoice, we've been able to pull out all the data and make a usable message that we can then use in the rest of our business process. So this is really, really powerful stuff. So that's an example of document processing. The last one I've got is really just the fact that you can support your customers by making your own AI agents. So when you come to support customers, a key thing is that you might have a lot of product brochures, product data, reference data, all sorts of information. And actually, if you've got customer service agents, that you want to make them as productive as possible, but also you can make this self-serve to your customers. So when you want to create, so just like copilots can be used to create code, you can make a chat experience that either your customer service agents can use or that your customers can use, that's based on your own information. And it allows your customers to interrogate that in their own way. One of the ways that we use this for is that we can store all our requirements documents for an integration solution, and then we can actually query those and help support a solution better by being able to interrogate that data. So and again, this is a RAG solution, so it's not red, amber, green. It's retrieval augmented generation. But from the user device, the key part is we have an orchestrator that manages everything, and that goes to a data retrieval service that looks in a data store, and that's where our data is. And then it obviously then uses the large language models to then try to understand what we're trying to do and to produce a response. So in this example, what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example where we can allow customers to access product brochures, and this uses the new .NET chat web project. And the key thing here is that we can make a reusable app because it deploys with a data store, but we can, in every solution, we can populate that data store with different documents. And we can style it and we can make it look how we want to do. But the fact that we can build an intelligent AI support thing and then reuse that in different scenarios by populating with different data is actually a really powerful thing. So again, I'm just going to flip over to our example of this. So this is our thing. This is our support agent, and we've just got it based around two products. But if you were a company with hundreds of products and hundreds of product data sheets and that sort of thing, this would become more and more compelling. But in this one, we've got a product sheet which is just an emergency survival kit. So it's got all sorts of stuff about the survival kit, and then we've got a product brochure on a GPS watch. So I can ask this question like, what what are the key features of the GPS watch? And okay, it'll go into the document and it will find these things, which is okay. But what it will also do is it will give me links to where in those documents that information was. But I can ask it, but I can start asking questions of the product, like what will the product do if I lose signal, and it will give me the answers. And then it even suggests things that you can find out next. So actually, just a really powerful way to interrogate information, and really, and I say we use this in integrations by allowing us to interrogate the schematics, the diagrams, the specifications, the design documents, the architecture, all that data around the solution, and we can go and do the same thing in our integration solution. So those are just some ways in which we've been using AI to enhance our enterprise integration solutions. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow now and just and we'll just spend a couple of minutes looking at the future and what's possible. So I suppose what I've done here, Dave, is just write a bit of a wish list of because time is money, so it would be great if we could have better Copilot support for generating integration solutions, particularly logic apps. And also hooking up APIs, so knowing what the spec of an API is, and then being able to write the integrations that then call that. Being able to add APIs into API management more easily, including the DevOps code for that, and a big one for us is just better support for migrations. So that's our kind of wish list. But is there anything, what would you say in terms of, if that's our wish list, what's there already, and is anything else just around the corner?
Yeah, as we've seen, we have Copilots available across Azure at the moment. So you can use Copilots in logic apps, you can use it in API management, and across a bunch of other services too. So we already have a lot of AI that's available. And certainly if you look at logic apps, the connectors that we have to the different Azure AI services are there already today. But in terms of making life easier for developers of building integrations, which really I think is at the heart of what you're what you're asking for here. I mean, we're investing really heavily in AI, and our goal is to make life easier for developers. So I think watch this space, and I think the future is clearly AI. So well, can't share anything immediately, but definitely these are areas that we're looking at.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. But of course, we've got looking ahead, to the next quarter. We've got we've got Integrate conference next quarter, so there may be some more announcements in that. I mean, obviously, Microsoft tend to keep their announcements to signature events, so there might be something coming up at Integrate. So definitely look out for that one. And then quarter 3, I think, is that when Ignite's coming up. So I think we can definitely look forward to some more sort of major announcements coming up. We don't quite know what they are yet, but as I say, the pace of change is such that we know there will be stuff coming. It's just exactly when it's going to be released that's that we don't know about. Okay, so just wrapping up really. I mean, I suppose the main takeaways are that we've been looking at ways that AI can assist you, and so you can govern the use of AI, and that's a really important thing for cost, for resilience, for and that kind of thing. We can make our business processes smarter by embedding AI in them to do things that previously it was really hard to do, particularly around unstructured data. And we've also looked at the speeding up development or migration of integration solutions. So some really powerful things, and these are all available now. And I think that's the key takeaway from this session for me, Dave, is that this stuff is actually available and we don't have to wait for it. So I think really that's pretty much where we are. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look through the comments and sort of have a look at some of the questions we've had. So Dave Robinson. Hi, Dave. So we talked about rate limiting before. And that each client can be identified separately by client ID, but can we rate them per client rather than across the whole API? I think is the question there. If we're, so that, operations might have 1,000 tokens a minute, but, finance might have 200. Is it possible to limit on that kind of thing, or limit which apps are calling?
Yeah, my colleague Mark answered that in the chat, but yes, you can rate limit on anything that you like, so it doesn't have to be just the subscription or the API that you can use an expression. So yeah, as Mark said in the chat there, you can do it on a bunch of different things.
No, that's really good to know. Next one is the generative mapping functionality, this sort of you showed generating the XSLT. Is that available on all the GitHub Copilot plans, or is that limited to any particular one?
As far as I'm aware, it works across them all. And again, Mark said in the chat that it did. So I think that's a yes to that question.
Oh yeah, and here's one from you, Dave. But in terms of announcements, don't forget the build is in May. I keep forgetting the build's in May because it's like, well, first of all, it used to be later in the year, but now it's mostly virtual. It used to be an event that I look forward to going to, but now you can just tune in to build from the comfort of your own home. I've got another one here from Andrew, which is speeding up testing, and I suppose particularly around integration and logic apps. So and this, I think what Andrew is saying here isn't necessarily this isn't available, but it's like maybe for a future webinar we can do a demo on how we can speed up testing, what the strategies to speed up testing, because that's, you know, that can slow projects down quite a lot, particularly for integration projects, being able to pull out all the different scenarios. So have you got any thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, am I on mute? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Copilot can create unit tests. It really is your friend. And yeah, I mean, in terms of logic apps, we could use Copilot for that too. So yeah, I think Copilot is definitely the way forward for creating unit tests for sure.
Great stuff. So we haven't actually got any other. I mean, I think the only comments we're getting through are the ones that are coming through from StreamYard, and so we haven't got any others at the moment. But that's everything. So, do you have any final thoughts to wrap up with, Dave?
Only just to reiterate what you said, really, that there's a huge amount of AI services that we can use today that are available in Azure, and also we've spoken a lot about GitHub Copilot and just making sure that that developers are making use of it, because it really does make your life so much easier. And these things, as you said right at the start, they're evolving so quickly that that you know, some features that may not be there today certainly will be there tomorrow. So keep an eye on the announcements and things like build, ignite, and you mentioned about integrate as well. But make sure that you're watching these events to keep up to date with the latest announcements. But it's only going to get better, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's no. You know, there's only one direction to travel. It's only going to get better, and I think the other thing is that you can't ignore it either. It's all this stuff's here to stay. You can't ignore it. So the sooner you start getting on board with it, then it will definitely be good for you to be looking at this stuff right now. And just it's fun. Like Copilot is actually fun to play with, and just to see what comes out. It's brilliant. It's not a chore. It's actually really fun to use.
I saw a brilliant quote from Kent Weir, who is a program manager in the Logic Apps team, and he said, he was asked the question, it was something like, is AI going to take my job? And he said, no, but somebody that knows AI will. And I think that's the key thing, is that, you know, we really need to embrace this technology and, you know, embrace it for our customers and our own productivity. It's here to stay. It's only going to get better. And it's such an important part, I think, of not just organizations, but developers. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up there. But thanks everyone for tuning in today. Whether you've been watching on StreamYard or on LinkedIn or on YouTube, great to have you on the webinar. And let's say you can still keep sending the comments through, and I'll get round to answering everything afterwards if I can. And thanks to you, Dave, for those brilliant demos. And we'll stay tuned for the next webinar. So we'll be publishing the next webinars. I think the next one on Azure and AI and integration is probably going to be end of May sometime, but we'll be putting that out on the usual channels very soon. So thanks for attending. Thanks, Dave, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.